The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, Earth Standard Time. Every screen across 12 human star systems flickered and died, replaced by the same symbol. A circle of 47 stars arranged in perfect harmony. The Galactic Council had something to say, and they made sure everyone would listen. Ambassador Hana stood in the communications center on Earth, watching the alien faces appear one by one on the massive display wall. She had spent 5 years working with these beings, learning their languages, understanding their cultures, trying to build bridges between humanity and the wider galaxy. Now, as she looked at their cold expressions, she felt something break inside her chest. "Humanity," began the council speaker, a tall creature with 4 eyes and skin like polished stone. "You have expanded too far, too fast. Your nature is violent. Your ships carry weapons that threaten peace. We have decided to protect the galaxy from your aggression." Hana's hands trembled. "This is absurd. We haven't attacked anyone. Every colony we've established was on uninhabited worlds. Every ship we've built was for defense." The speaker continued as if she hadn't spoken. "You have 30 Earth days to comply with our terms. Surrender all military vessels. Dismantle your orbital defenses. Accept our governance. If you refuse, we will enforce compliance by force." The transmission ended. The screens went black. For 3 full seconds, nobody in the communications center moved or breathed. Then chaos erupted. Across Earth, people poured into the streets. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others screamed for war. The government buildings in Geneva were surrounded by crowds within the hour. Hana watched from her office window as humanity tore itself apart over a decision that hadn't even been made yet. Captain Day 1 received the news while his ship, the UES Retribution, was docked at the Mars orbital station. He was in the mess hall, drinking terrible coffee and playing cards with his crew, when the alert came through. Every officer on the station was ordered to report immediately. Day 1 was 43 years old. He had fought in the border skirmishes against pirates and raiders. He had seen good people die in the black void of space. He knew what war looked like, and he knew it was coming. "Sir," his first officer said quietly as they walked to the briefing room, "do you think they'll really attack us?" Day 1 didn't answer immediately. He thought about the council species he had met over the years. Most of them were old, comfortable, set in their ways. They had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years without serious challenge. Then humanity had appeared, climbing from their single planet to the stars in less than 2 centuries. The council wasn't afraid of human violence. They were afraid of human potential. "Yes," Day 1 finally said, "they'll attack. They've already decided." In a secret laboratory beneath the Swiss mountains, scientist G1 stared at her life's work. The machines hummed quietly around her, processing calculations that would have taken human minds centuries to complete. She had been working on this project for 7 years. Ever since Admiral Tae Min had recruited her with a simple question. What if we had to fight the entire galaxy? 1. At the time, she had laughed. It seemed impossible, paranoid even. But Tae Min had showed her the classified reports. The Council had destroyed 17 other emerging civilizations throughout history, sometimes through war, sometimes through sabotage, sometimes through simple economic strangulation. Any species that grew too quickly, that innovated too fast, that threatened the established order was eliminated. Humanity was next. G1's hands moved across the control panel, activating systems that had never been tested outside simulations. If the Council came, humanity would need every advantage. She just wasn't sure if using these weapons would make them the heroes or the monsters. Admiral Tae Min sat in the command center deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. The room was filled with screens showing military deployments, resource calculations, and strategic projections. He had been preparing for this day since he was a young officer, since he first realized that the galaxy's peaceful appearance was built on the graves of countless civilizations. "Admiral," his aide said, "the Council is waiting for Earth's response." Tae Min looked at the prepared statement on his screen. It was carefully worded, diplomatic, designed to buy time, while seeming to consider the Council's demands seriously. It might give them a few more weeks of peace. He deleted it. Instead, he typed 3 words: simple, direct, final. "Are you sure, sir?" his aide asked, reading over his shoulder. "They made their choice when they sent that ultimatum," Taemin said. "They thought we would be too afraid to fight back. They thought we would surrender our freedom to survive. They don't understand humans very well." He pressed send. Across the galaxy, on every council world, on every ship, on every station, the same message appeared. 3 words that would echo through history. 3 words that turned diplomacy into defiance. 3 words that started a war. "You chose this." On the council flagship, Councillor Vaxar read the message and laughed. His species, the Avari, had conquered hundreds of worlds before joining the council. He knew how primitives reacted when faced with superior force. They begged. They pleaded. They surrendered. This response was just posturing. Humans would fall in line once the first missiles struck their colonies. They always did. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "We'll hit their outer settlements first. Nuinchan, Jeju Station, and Busan Outpost. Small colonies, lightly defended. Once they see what we can do, Earth will surrender within a week." His officers rushed to comply. Vaxthar smiled. This would be simple. Back on Earth, Hana walked through the empty halls of the diplomatic complex. Her entire career had been built on the belief that different species could understand each other, work together, build something better than war. Now that belief lay in ruins around her feet. She found Taemin in his office, staring at a wall covered with star maps. "You sent the message," she said. "I did. We could have negotiated. Bought time. Found a peaceful solution." Taemin turned to face her. His eyes were sad but steady. "There was no peaceful solution, Hana. The Council decided to destroy us before they ever sent that ultimatum. The only question was whether we would die on our knees or on our feet. And now? Now we show them what humans do when we're backed into a corner." He pointed to the star map. "Captain Daewon's fleet is already moving to defensive positions. Our colony governors are activating emergency protocols. Scientist G1 is preparing weapon systems that the Council doesn't even know exist." Hana closed her eyes. "How many will die? Millions, probably. Maybe billions." Taemin's voice was heavy. "But if we surrender, humanity dies anyway. Just slower. Just quieter. I'd rather we go down fighting." Across human space, the countdown began. 30 days until the Council deadline. 30 days until the war that would reshape the galaxy. Ships moved into position. Weapons were armed. Families said goodbyes. Soldiers prepared for battles they might not survive. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the Council fleet began its journey toward human space, confident in their overwhelming numbers, certain of their inevitable victory. They had no idea what was coming. They had chosen this war. Now, they would learn what it meant to fight humanity. The attack came 7 days after Earth's defiant response. Not 30 days as promised. The Council had decided that humanity's refusal deserved immediate punishment. Colonel Jae-sung was drinking morning coffee when the sirens began. He was on New Incheon, a colony of 60,000 people on the edge of human space. Mining colony mostly. With families, schools, small farms, in the biodomes. Not a military target by any reasonable standard. But the Council wasn't being reasonable. All military personnel report to stations. This is not a drill. Repeat. This is not a drill. Jae-sung ran to the command center, pulling on his uniform as he moved. Through the dome's transparent ceiling, he could see them coming. Hundreds of ships, blotting out the stars like a swarm of locusts. "How long until they're in firing range?" he asked. 12 minutes, his tactical officer replied. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. Jae-sung looked at the numbers on his screen. New Incheon had 40 defensive turrets, 3 small patrol ships, and 2,000 soldiers. The Council fleet had enough firepower to crack a planet. The math was simple and brutal. Get the civilians to the deep shelters, he ordered. All of them. Children first. Sir, the shelters can only hold 40,000. We have 60,000 people here. Then pack them tighter. Move. At Jeju Station, Lieutenant Hyun sat in the cockpit of her fighter, hands gripping the controls so hard her knuckles turned white. She was 24 years old. She had logged 800 flight hours, all of them in training exercises and patrol runs. She had never fired a weapon in anger. She had never seen someone die. That was about to change. Blue Squadron, form up. Her commander's voice crackled through the comm. We're outnumbered 50 to 1. But we're faster. And we know this space better. Make every shot count. Hyun checked her weapon systems. 4 missiles, 2 energy cannons. Enough fuel for 90 minutes of combat. Against an armada. My grandmother used to tell me stories, she said to her wingman. About the old wars on Earth. She said humans don't know how to give up. Even when we should. Let's hope she was right. The Council ships opened fire first. Missiles streaked through space like shooting stars. The human fighters scattered, dancing through the incoming fire with desperate grace. Hyun dove under a cruiser, firing both cannons at its engine port. Shields flared but held. She cursed and rolled away as return fire chased her. Her wingman wasn't fast enough. His fighter vanished, in a ball of white-hot plasma. Hyun screamed, not in fear but in rage, and pushed her fighter into a climb that should have torn it apart. She emptied all 4 missiles into the cruiser's wounded shield. And this time they penetrated. Explosions rippled across the alien ship's hull. 1 down. 49 to go. Back on New Incheon, the first bombardment shook the colony like an earthquake. Jae-sung watched on his screens as the eastern dome cracked and depressurized. Alarms wailed. People ran through the corridors, carrying children, helping the elderly, trying to reach safety that didn't exist. Return fire, Jae-sung ordered. All batteries. The colony's defensive turrets opened up, streams of projectiles and energy beams reaching toward the Council ships. They destroyed 2 small fighters and damaged a frigate before the Council concentrated their fire and methodically eliminated each turret. 20 minutes into the battle, New Incheon had lost half its defenses. Colonel, his communications officer called out. Message from Admiral Taemin. Jae-sung pulled up the transmission. The Admiral's face was grim. Colonel, hold for 36 more hours. I know what I'm asking. Just hold. The transmission ended before Jae-sung could respond. Hold for 36 hours. Against an overwhelming force that was systematically destroying his colony. The Admiral might as well have asked him to move a mountain with his bare hands. But orders were orders. All units, dig in, Jae-sung commanded. They want this colony. They'll have to take it meter by meter. At Busan Outpost, the smallest of the 3 targeted colonies, the defense had already failed. The Council ships had landed troops, and now alien soldiers moved through the corridors, securing the station section by section. But Engineer Sung-ho wasn't giving up. He had worked on Busan for 12 years, knew every tunnel, every access shaft, every hidden maintenance corridor. Now he used that knowledge to organize resistance. They've got better weapons and armor, he told the 200 civilians who had armed themselves with mining tools and improvised explosives. But we know this station. And they don't. We hit them where they're not looking, then disappear before they can respond. It wasn't military strategy. It was desperation. But desperation had a way of making people creative. Sung-ho led a team through the ventilation system, emerging behind a group of Council soldiers. 3 seconds of chaos. 5 aliens down, and the humans vanished into the walls before reinforcements arrived. Over and over, in a dozen places, civilians became guerrilla fighters. The Council had expected quick surrender. Instead, they found themselves in a grinding, bloody struggle for every room. Back at Jeju Station, Hyun's fighter was dying. One engine was gone. Her shields were at 15%, and she had exactly 3 minutes of fuel remaining. Around her, the rest of Blue Squadron was gone. She was the last one flying. She could eject. Drift in space until the Council picked her up or she froze. Live as a prisoner, maybe survive the war. Instead, she pointed her crippled fighter at the Council flagship and pushed the throttle to maximum. "This is Blue 7, she transmitted on all frequencies. "For Jeju, for humanity, for everyone we've lost." The Council ship tried to shoot her down. But she was too small, too fast, too close. She slammed into their bridge section at 3,000 meters per second. The flagship shuddered, lost power, and began a slow tumble through space. Without its command ship, the Council fleet's coordination collapsed. Hyun never knew that her sacrifice saved the station. She was gone in an instant, transformed from a person into a weapon, from a frightened young pilot into a legend. On New Incheon, Jae-sung watched his defense perimeter shrink with each passing hour. They were down to 20 soldiers, 15 turrets, and 1 patrol ship. The civilians huddled in the deep shelters, praying for rescue that seemed impossible. Then something strange happened. The Council ships stopped firing. They hung in space, motionless, as if waiting. "What are they doing?" Jae-sung's tactical officer asked. Before anyone could answer, the Council ships began exploding. Not from weapons fire, just exploding, one after another, like firecrackers on a string. "Sir, I'm reading massive power fluctuations in their systems. It's like something is making their reactors overload." Jae-sung pulled up the tactical display and saw new contacts appearing. Thousands of small objects, too small to be ships, drifting through the Council formation. Mines. Someone had mined the space around New Incheon. "This is Admiral Tae-min." A transmission burst through. "Sorry we're late, Colonel. Quantum disruption mines. Still experimental, but they seem to work pretty well. Quantum. Tae-min. Owning. 2000. Quantum. Tae-min." By the time the Council fleet realized what was happening, they had lost 40% of their ships. The survivors broke formation and fled, leaving their ground troops stranded. Jae-sung slumped in his chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. They had held for 72 hours. 60,000 civilians were alive because his soldiers had refused to give up. But when he looked at casualty reports, his heart sank. 3,000 dead, including most of his command staff, including friends he had known for 20 years. The victory tasted like ashes. Across human space, the 3 colonies had survived the Council's first strike. But barely. Billions watched the battle recordings, saw the desperate courage, witnessed the terrible cost. On Earth, Admiral Tae-min addressed the military commanders. "The Council thought we would break easily," he said. "They were wrong. Now they know what fighting humans means. Now the real war begins." Quote. That. Quote. Wrong. Quote. Quote. Wrong. In his private quarters, he listened to Jae-sung's final transmission from the worst moments of the battle. The colonel's voice, steady despite everything, saying words that would be remembered forever. "We are humanity. We do not kneel." Tae-min made sure those words were broadcast across every human world. Let the people know what their soldiers had done. Let them understand the price being paid. Let the Council hear it too, and realize their mistake. This war had just begun, and already the galaxy would never be the same. 2 weeks after the first battle, Captain Dae-won's fleet emerged from hyperspace deep inside Council territory. 30 human warships appeared without warning in the Andros system, home to the Council's largest military shipyard. The shipyard's defense coordinator had exactly 45 seconds to realize what was happening before the UES Retribution's main guns opened fire. Dae-won stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display with cold focus. This wasn't just revenge for the colony attacks. This was strategy. The Council had more ships than humanity could ever build, but those ships had to come from somewhere. Destroy the shipyards, and the numerical advantage disappeared. Target the construction bays first, he ordered. Then the fuel depots. Leave the residential areas alone. His weapons officer looked up in surprise. Sir, if we hit the residential areas, we could cut their workforce in half. We're not murderers, Day One said quietly. We're soldiers. There's a difference. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When Day One's fleet jumped back to hyperspace, the Andros shipyard was a burning ruin. But not a single civilian habitat had been touched. The Council was learning that humanity fought differently than they expected. Meanwhile, on Busan Outpost, Engineer Sung-ho was having the strangest day of his life. He had managed to capture a Council communications terminal during one of his guerrilla raids, and now he was trying to crack its encryption. He wasn't a military codebreaker. He fixed mining equipment and maintained life support systems. But he was stubborn, and he had nothing but time while hiding in the maintenance tunnels. 3 days of work finally produced results. The terminal unlocked, and Seung-ho found himself staring at years of classified Council communications. What he read made his blood run cold. We need to get this to Earth, he told his small band of resistance fighters. Right now. Dr. Yuna was exhausted. The medical bay on the UES Retribution had been running at full capacity for 16 straight hours, treating wounded from the Andros raid, broken bones, burns, radiation exposure. The price of war, written in blood and bandages. She moved from bed to bed, doing what she could with limited supplies and too few hands. A young gunner with shrapnel in his leg. A navigator with severe burns across her face. A Marine who kept asking for teammates who hadn't made it back. Doctor, a nurse called. We have Council prisoners in Bay 3. Wounded from the ships we disabled. Yuna paused. The smart thing would be to let someone else handle them. She was tired, emotionally drained, barely holding herself together. But the oath she had taken didn't have exceptions for enemies. I'll be there in 5 minutes, she said. The Council soldiers watched her with fear as she approached. They had been told humans were savages who would torture prisoners. Instead, Yuna treated their wounds with the same care she gave her own crew. Why? One of them asked, in broken human language. We attacked your people. Because you're hurt, Yuna replied. That's all the reason I need. She didn't know if he understood. She wasn't sure she understood herself. The war demanded hate, but her hands kept healing. Maybe that made her weak. Maybe it made her the only sane person left. Ambassador Hana stood before the Assembly of Neutral Species, a collection of civilizations that had refused to join either side of the war. She had traveled here in secret, carrying the data that Seung-ho had risked his life to obtain. The Council told you they attacked humanity because we were dangerous, Hana said, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. They lied. She activated the holographic display, and classified Council documents appeared in the air. Communications between Council leaders from 2 years before the war began. Plans to suppress humanity's technological advancement. Discussions of how to destroy Earth's economy, without it looking like deliberate sabotage. And most damning of all, a list. 17 species that had been eliminated throughout Council history, some through war, some through economic warfare, some through deliberate sabotage of their homeworlds. All of them had committed the same crime. They had advanced too quickly. The Council doesn't maintain peace, Hana continued. They maintain stagnation. Any species that threatens to match their technology is destroyed. Not because they're violent, unimportant, not because they're dangerous, but because they're competition. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Representatives from 40 different species, all suddenly wondering if they would be next. By the end of the day, 3 Council species had withdrawn from the war. 2 more were reconsidering their alliance. The unified front the Council had presented was beginning to crack. On Earth, Admiral Tae-min met with scientist G1 in the secure laboratory. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. The AI warship project is ready, G1 said, calling up schematics on the main screen. Fully automated combat vessels. No crew required. They can fight for days without rest, make tactical decisions in microseconds, coordinate perfectly across entire fleets. Tae-min studied the designs. Casualties? None. On our side anyway. That's the point. We can fight the Council without risking more human lives. And on their side? Ji-won's expression darkened. The AI doesn't understand mercy. It's programmed to win battles as efficiently as possible. That means maximum destruction with minimum waste. If we deploy these ships, the Council casualties will be catastrophic. Tae-min was quiet for a long moment. Do we have a choice? There's always a choice, Admiral. The question is whether we're willing to pay the price for making it. Activate the program, Tae-min said finally. But keep human commanders in the chain of command. I want someone who can order a retreat, a ceasefire. Mercy. The AI might not understand those concepts, but we still need to. Ji-won nodded, but she felt sick. She had created weapons that could win the war. She just wasn't sure what kind of people humanity would be when it was over. Captain Daewon received new orders while his fleet was resupplying at a hidden base. 3 more shipyards to hit, followed by strikes on Council logistics hubs. The strategy was working. Every raid weakened the Council's ability to maintain their massive fleets, but Daewon could see the cost in his crew. They were winning battles, but their eyes were getting harder. Their jokes were getting darker. War was changing them, turning idealistic young officers into tired, grim survivors. Sir, his first officer said quietly, some of the crew are asking when we go home. Tell them the truth, Daewon replied. When the war is over. And when will that be? Daewon didn't have an answer. The war spread across the galaxy like a cancer. Battles in dozens of systems. Raids. Counter-raids. Ambushes. The Council's numerical advantage was slowly being ground down by human tactics and technology. But the cost kept rising. Every week brought news of another colony attacked, another ship lost, another 1,000 lives ended. The casualty reports were classified. But everyone knew the numbers were terrible. On both sides, people began to wonder if there was any way to end this without destroying everything. Counselor Vaxthar sat in his command center, staring at tactical displays that showed the deteriorating situation. 3 months ago, he had promised an easy victory. Now, 40% of the Council fleet was destroyed or disabled. Their shipyards were burning, and 3 species had abandoned the alliance. How is this possible? He demanded. They're one species, one primitive species that has been in space for barely 2 centuries. His military advisor looked uncomfortable. They're adaptable, Counselor. Every tactic we use, they find a counter. Every weapon we deploy, they build a defense. And now, with these AI ships appearing in battle, we have thousands of years of experience. And they have nothing to lose, the advisor said quietly. An enemy with nothing to lose is the most dangerous kind. Vaxthar dismissed the advisor and sat alone in the dark, wrestling with a truth he didn't want to accept. The Council had made a mistake. A terrible, catastrophic mistake. They had started a war they might not be able to win. Back on the UES Retribution, Dr. Yuna finished treating the last of the Council prisoners. One of them, the soldier who had asked why she helped them, was watching her with strange intensity. Your people are not what we were told, he said. What were you told? That you were monsters. That you would kill us all without mercy. That the galaxy needed protection from your violence. Yuna sat down, suddenly too tired to stand. And what do you think now? The soldier touched the bandages she had applied to his wounds. I think perhaps we are the monsters. And we didn't even know it. Yuna had no response to that. She just sat in the quiet medical bay, surrounded by the wounded from both sides, and wondered what kind of galaxy would exist when this was finally over. If it was ever over. 6 months into the war, the Council made their final gamble. Every available warship, every remaining resource, every ounce of their fading power focused on one objective: destroy Earth itself. Operation Final Dawn began on a Monday morning. General Kyung-soo had been a high school teacher before the war. He taught mathematics to bored teenagers and coached the basketball team on weekends. Then the council attacked, and the government found out he had spent 10 years in the military before becoming a teacher. They needed commanders for Earth's orbital defense grid. Now he stood in the command bunker beneath Seoul, watching thousands of enemy ships appear at the edge of Earth's solar system. "How many?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would be terrible. "Preliminary count shows 7,000 capital ships, sir. Plus support vessels. Total fleet strength approximately 12,000 ships. Kyung-soo had 800 defense platforms, 300 orbital fortresses, and 200 warships. The math was simple and brutal. "Send the evacuation signal," he ordered. "Get as many people underground as possible. We have maybe 6 hours before they're in firing range." Across Earth, sirens wailed. Billions of people dropped everything and ran for the shelters. Parents grabbed children. Elderly helped elderly. Strangers carried strangers when they couldn't walk. In Seoul, young Minho held his little sister's hand as they ran with their mother toward the nearest shelter entrance. He was 16 years old, and he understood enough to be terrified. "Are we going to die?" his sister asked. "No," Minho lied. "The soldiers will protect us." He hoped that was true. In space, Captain Daewon's fleet raced toward Earth at maximum speed. They had been raiding Council supply lines when the alert came through. Every human ship in the galaxy was converging on Earth, but most of them wouldn't arrive in time. Daewon looked at his tactical officer. "How long until we reach Earth?" 4 hours, sir. The battle will already be underway. Then we go faster." "Sir, we're already pushing the engines past their safety limits." I said faster. The UES Retribution shuddered as her engines strained beyond design specifications. It didn't matter if they burned out. As long as they got there in time. The Council fleet reached Earth's orbit and immediately encountered the first defense layer. 800 automated platforms opened fire simultaneously, creating a wall of energy and metal that tore through the Council's forward elements. But there were too many. For every Council ship destroyed, 3 more took its place. General Kyung-soo watched the defense platforms die one by one. Each explosion was a light going out on his tactical display. Each light represented dozens of automated weapons that would never fire again. "Second layer, activate," he commanded. The orbital fortresses, massive constructs built in the desperate months after the war began, opened up with their main batteries. These were stronger, better defended, harder to destroy. They lasted 20 minutes longer than the platforms. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "we've lost 60% of our orbital defenses. Enemy fleet is advancing on low Earth orbit." Kyung-soo looked at the countdown timer on his screen. 3 hours until Admiral Taemin's reinforcements arrived. 3 hours that felt like an eternity. "Activate the barrier protocol," he said. Every military officer in the command center turned to stare at him. "Sir, the barrier can only hold for 6 hours, and it drains every power plant on the planet. If we activate it now..." 2. "If we don't activate it now, there won't be a planet left to power," Kyung-soo interrupted. "Do it." Across Earth, every nuclear reactor, every solar farm, every power generation facility suddenly diverted its full output to the network of satellites hidden in high orbit. The satellites had cost $50 trillion and represented humanity's most advanced technology. They created a sphere of pure energy around Earth, a shield that nothing could penetrate. The Council fleet hammered against it with everything they had. Missiles exploded harmlessly against the barrier. Energy beams scattered off its surface. Even antimatter weapons left nothing but ripples. But the clock was ticking. 6 hours of protection. Then the power would run out, and Earth would be defenseless. Inside the barrier, General Kyung-soo allowed himself one moment of relief before returning to the larger problem. The barrier bought time. but it didn't win the war. Captain Day One's fleet arrived 3.5 hours later. 200 human warships, battered and exhausted from months of combat, dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's system. They saw the Council fleet, 12,000 strong, surrounding their homeworld. All ships. Day One transmitted. This is it. Everything we've fought for, everything we've lost people for, comes down to this moment. That's our home down there. Our families. Our future. We hold this line, or we hold nothing. The human fleet charged into battle like wolves attacking a herd of elephants. It should have been suicide. It was suicide by any reasonable calculation. But Day One didn't care about calculations anymore. He cared about the planet behind him and the people he had sworn to protect. The UES Retribution led the charge, her guns blazing. Around her, human ships darted and weaved through the Council formation, hitting weak points, exploiting gaps, fighting with desperate fury. And then, the AI ships arrived. Scientist G1 had unleashed her creations. 200 automated warships that fought with inhuman precision. They coordinated perfectly, anticipated enemy movements, never hesitated, never tired, never showed mercy. The Council fleet suddenly found itself fighting an enemy that didn't care about survival, only victory. In the command bunker beneath Seoul, Admiral Tae Min watched the battle unfold. Human and AI ships were buying time, bleeding the Council fleet. But the numbers were still impossible. On his desk sat a red folder marked Silence Protocol. Inside were the activation codes for humanity's doomsday weapon, a device that could destroy the Council's homeworlds in an instant, wiping out billions of lives. Tae Min had never wanted to use it. The Silence Protocol was meant to be a deterrent, insurance that the Council wouldn't dare attack humanity, but they had dared. And now, Tae Min faced the most terrible decision any human had ever made. His hand rested on the folder. All he had to do was open it, enter the codes, and press one button. The war would be over. Humanity would win. And billions of innocent civilians across the galaxy would die screaming, "Sir," his aide said gently, "the barrier is failing. We have 43 minutes remaining." Tae Min opened the folder. In space, Captain Day One rammed his dying flagship into a Council super dreadnought. The UES Retribution, the most advanced ship humanity had ever built, became a weapon for the last time. Both ships exploded in a flash of light visible from Earth's surface. Day One never knew that his sacrifice destroyed the Council's command ship, throwing their fleet into chaos. He never knew that his crew would be remembered as heroes for 1,000 years. He just knew he had bought a few more minutes for the planet behind him. On Earth, Minho and his family huddled in the shelter as the walls shook from impacts against the barrier. His little sister was crying. His mother held them both, trying to be strong even though her hands trembled. "I'm scared," Minho whispered. "Me too," his mother replied. "But look around. We're all here together. Millions of us, underground, waiting for this to end. That's what humans do. We survive. We endure. We protect each other." Above them, the barrier flickered and died. The Council fleet, battered and reduced but still numbering in the thousands, prepared for the final bombardment. And in the command bunker, Admiral Tae Min's finger hovered over the activation button for the Silence Protocol. Billions of lives on one side of the scale, billions on the other. 43 minutes until Earth was destroyed. 43 minutes to decide the fate of the galaxy. His hand shook. Then every screen in the command center lit up with an incoming transmission. Not from the Council. From Ambassador Hana, speaking from the Assembly of Neutral Species. "Admiral, stop. I have a deal. Tell them you have a weapon that can destroy their homeworlds. Tell them you'll use it unless they withdraw immediately. I have neutral species ready to verify the threat and enforce a ceasefire." Tae Min stared at the screen. "Will they believe it?" "They will if you make them believe it. Humanity has done impossible things already. One more won't surprise them." This way. Taemin took a deep breath and activated Earth's final transmission. It broadcast on all frequencies, in all languages, to every ship in the system and every world in the galaxy. This is Admiral Taemin of the United Earth Space Force. We did not want this war. We begged for peace. We offered friendship. You chose violence. You chose extinction. He paused, letting the words sink in. You have 43 minutes to withdraw your fleets from Earth orbit. If you do not, we will activate a weapon that will destroy every Council homeworld simultaneously. This is not a bluff. This is not a negotiation. This is your last chance. Withdraw now, or there will be nothing left to withdraw to. The transmission ended. In the Council flagship's replacement command center, the officers looked at each other with growing fear. Humanity had surprised them before. Could they risk assuming this was a bluff? The clock ticked down. 42 minutes. 41. 40. And slowly, one by one, the Council ships began to turn away from Earth. The Council fleet withdrew with 43 minutes remaining. 43 minutes before Admiral Taemin would have had to decide whether to commit genocide or watch Earth burn. In the command bunker beneath Seoul, Taemin closed the red folder containing the silence protocol codes and allowed himself to breathe for the first time in hours. His hands were still shaking. "Sir," his aide said quietly. "Did we actually have the weapon?" Taemin looked at the young officer for a long moment. "Does it matter?" "They believed we did. Sometimes, belief is more powerful than reality." But later, alone in his quarters, Taemin opened the folder again and stared at the activation codes. The weapon was real. Scientist G1 had built it during the darkest days of the war, just as she had built the AI warships and the quantum disruption mines. All the terrible things humans created when survival was at stake. He had been ready to use it. His finger had been on the button. If Ambassador Hana's transmission had arrived 2 minutes later, the galaxy would be mourning billions. That knowledge would haunt him for the rest of his life. Across Earth, people emerged from shelters into a world that was damaged but still standing. Cities bore scars from debris that had made it through the barrier. Thousands had died in the attacks. But billions had survived. In Seoul, young Minho walked out into sunlight that seemed impossibly bright after hours underground. His sister held his hand, and his mother stood beside them, looking up at a sky that should have been their grave. "Is it over?" his sister asked. "I don't know," Minho replied honestly. "But we're still here. That has to count for something." The formal surrender took 3 days to negotiate. Ambassador Hana led the human delegation, meeting with council representatives in neutral territory, under the supervision of 6 independent species. Councillor Vaxthar represented what remained of council leadership. Most of the council's government had been replaced in emergency sessions after the Battle of Earth. The civilians who took control wanted peace, wanted survival, wanted to end a war that had already cost them more than they could afford. "Your terms," Vaxthar said, his voice heavy with defeat. Hana presented the document that had been prepared by legal experts from a dozen species. The terms were harsh, but not genocidal. The council would remain intact, but would abandon any claim to authority over other species. A new federation would be formed, democratic and inclusive, where every species had equal voice. War crimes tribunals would be held for council leaders who had orchestrated the attack. Reparations would be paid to rebuild damaged human colonies. And most importantly, the classified list of 17 species destroyed by the council would be made public, ensuring such atrocities could never happen again. "These terms are acceptable," Vaxthar said quietly. "We accept unconditional surrender." The war was over. News of the peace spread across the galaxy within hours. On human worlds, people celebrated in the streets. On council worlds, reactions were mixed. Some felt relief that the killing had stopped. Others felt shame at what their leaders had done. A few plotted revenge, though they kept those thoughts hidden. General Kyung-soo stood in the ruins of Earth's orbital defense network and looked at what remained of his command. 74 of his 800 defense platforms had survived. 21 orbital fortresses out of 300. 6 warships from the 200 that had defended Earth. The victory had cost almost everything. "Sir," one of his officers said, "the Education Ministry is asking when you'll return to teaching." Kyung-soo thought about going back to a classroom, teaching calculus to teenagers who would never know how close they came to not existing. He thought about coaching basketball and grading papers and all the simple, peaceful things that had seemed boring before the war. "Tell them next semester," he said. "I need to help rebuild this first." In the ruins of the UES Retribution, recovery teams searched for survivors. They found none. Captain Day 1 and his entire crew had been lost when the ship rammed the Council superdreadnought. But they found the ship's log, the final recordings of those last moments. Day 1's voice, calm and steady, even as his ship was dying. "To whoever finds this, we knew what we were doing. We knew the cost. We chose it anyway because Earth was behind us, and there was nowhere left to run. Tell our families we died protecting them. Tell humanity that freedom is worth the price. Tell the galaxy that humans don't kneel, even at the end." The recording became the most famous document of the war. Day 1 became a legend. His name was given to schools, parks, ships. His sacrifice was remembered, but his family just wanted him back. Dr. Yuna worked in a hospital in Geneva now, treating the wounded from both sides of the war. The psychological trauma cases were the worst. Soldiers who couldn't sleep because of what they had seen. Civilians who jumped at sudden sounds. Children who had nightmares about the sky falling. "Will we ever be the same?" one of her patients asked. A young soldier who had lost both legs in the Battle of Jeju Station. "No," Yuna replied honestly. "We'll never be who we were before. But that doesn't mean we can't be someone good. Someone who learned from this. Someone who makes sure it never happens again." She hoped that was true. The war crimes tribunals began 6 months after the surrender. Council leaders who had planned the attack, who had knowingly started a war of extermination, stood trial before judges from neutral species. The evidence was overwhelming. Classified communications proving the attack was planned years in advance. Records of the 17 species destroyed throughout history. Testimony from whistleblowers who had tried to stop it. Vaxthar was among those convicted. He received a life sentence in a high-security facility, where he would spend the rest of his days contemplating the war he had promised would be easy. Ambassador Hana attended the trials every day. She had spent her life believing in diplomacy, in the possibility of peace, in the goodness of different species working together. The war had shattered that belief. But now, watching justice being served, watching the galaxy publicly acknowledge what had been done wrong, she felt something like hope returning. Maybe they could build something better from the ruins. Scientist Ji-won stood in her laboratory, looking at her life's work. The AI warships, the quantum disruption mines, the silence protocol, all the terrible weapons she had created to save humanity. She had a decision to make. The government wanted to keep the technology, to maintain humanity's military advantage. But Ji-won knew what would happen if these weapons stayed in the world. Arms races, escalation. Eventually, another war. She spent 3 days reviewing her research, making copies of certain sections, deleting others. Then she initiated a total data wipe. When Admiral Taemin found out, he stormed into her lab. "What have you done? That technology could have protected us for generations. It would have destroyed us." Ji-won replied calmly. "Either by making us into monsters who relied on weapons of genocide, or by making everyone else desperate enough to attack us first. I kept the defensive technology. The rest had to go. I could have you arrested for this. You could, but you won't, because you know I'm right." Taemin stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. "You're right. I hate that you're right. But you are." He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, thank you." for building what we needed to survive, and for destroying what would have corrupted us. G1 nodded, alone again in her empty laboratory. She had saved humanity twice, once by giving them weapons, once by taking those weapons away. She hoped history would remember both. The first session of the new Galactic Assembly was held 1 year after the war ended. Representatives from every species, including humanity and the former council members, gathered to build a new framework for galactic civilization. Ambassador Hana stood to give the opening address. She was older now, marked by the war in ways that would never fully heal. But her voice was strong. "We gather here as equals," she began. "Not conquerors and conquered. Not superior and inferior. Equals. Every species in this chamber has committed mistakes. Every species has blood on their hands. But every species also has the capacity to do better." She paused, looking around the vast assembly. This war should never have happened. But it did. We can't change that. What we can change is what comes next. We can build a galaxy where disputes are solved with words instead of weapons, where new species are welcomed instead of feared, where progress is celebrated instead of crushed. The Assembly voted to establish the new Federation by unanimous consent. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't solve every problem. But it was a start. On Earth, young Minho was now 17. He stood at a memorial wall in Seoul, looking at the names of those who had died in the war. Thousands of names. Millions, if you counted the whole memorial network. He found his neighbor's name. The old man who had coached his basketball team and had died when the barrier failed. He found names of classmates' parents, friends, teachers. "What are you thinking about?" his little sister asked. She was older now, too, though still small enough to hold his hand. "I'm thinking about what we do now," Minho said. "All these people died to give us a future. We have to make sure it's worth what they paid. How do we do that? By being better. By building instead of destroying. By remembering this but not letting it make us bitter." His sister thought about that. "That sounds hard." "It is," Minho agreed. "But humans are good at doing hard things." They stood together at the memorial, two among millions who had survived, carrying the weight of those who hadn't. 5 years after the war, Earth had rebuilt. The orbital defenses were stronger but designed for protection, not aggression. The colonies had recovered. Trade with other species was flourishing. The galaxy was learning to live in peace. Admiral Taemin retired from military service and wrote a book about the war. Not a celebration of victory, but an honest accounting of what had been sacrificed and what had been learned. The final chapter was a single sentence: "War is not glorious. It is necessary only when all other options have failed. And even in victory, everyone loses something." The book became required reading in schools across human space. In Geneva, Dr. Yuna trained the next generation of doctors. She taught them medicine, but also empathy. How to see the person behind the wound. How to heal without dehumanizing. "Remember," she told her students, "your oath is to life, not to sides. In war, we treated human and alien alike. That's what made us still human when everything else was trying to turn us into monsters." And on a distant world, in a secure facility, former Counselor Vaxthar sat in his cell and wrote his own account of the war. It was a confession, an apology, an attempt to understand how he had been so wrong. The final words he wrote were simple. "We chose this war. Humanity chose how it ended. That choice defined them. And us. May we learn from both." The galaxy moved forward, carrying the scars of war, but also the lessons. New species emerged and were welcomed instead of feared. Conflicts arose and were resolved through negotiation instead of violence. And on Earth, in every city, stood the same memorial. A simple monument with words that would never be forgotten. To those who fell when peace failed. Beneath it, preserved for all time, was Earth's final wartime message: "You chose this war." A reminder to the galaxy of what could happen when fear replaced wisdom. A reminder to humanity of the terrible price of survival, and a promise to both that it would never happen again.